Welcome to the December edition of What's in Bloom at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. Here we are on a lovely December day, uh, putting up with a little rain, but that's okay. Um, each month we make a sheet with about 21 plants on it that are in bloom in that particular month and hand this out to garden visitors. And so in the past, we've done our What's in Bloom video running right through that list. But last month we tried it a little differently and just did a selection of them. And I thought that went well. That avoids the repetition of things that are on the list over and over again. And so we're going to do that again this month. And so let's start out with a wonderful bulb, and that is Lachenalia punctata. So when I grew up, I thought of bulb central as being the Mediterranean. All the things like daffodils and tulips, hyacinths and grape hyacinths that are so familiar to American gardeners come from that area. But that's not the area that's the richest in bulbs. The area richest in bulbs in the whole world is South Africa. And that's where this Lachenalia comes from. So although Lachenalias aren't as well known as tulips in the United States, they are perfect for California because they come from the winter rainfall zone in the western part of South Africa, where the climate's very much like ours, and they are just great garden plants for California. The first Lachenalia to come up is Lachenalia punctata that you see here, and that starts in November. Others will come along in December and January, but the winter months are just great for Lachenalias. And as you can see, it's a bulb of low stature, but beautiful tubular red flowers. Other Lachenalias don't have flowers that are as long and tubular as this, and they come in all different colors. We have one called Lachenalia viridiflora that has amazing turquoise flowers. They are really wonderful, wonderful bulbs. And here's the first one, Lachenalia punctata. And I should point out the leaves also. The leaves have purple spots on them and are a delight in themselves. So come check it out if you come to the Ruth Bancroft Garden, Lachenalia punctata. For our next act, we have Hakea petiolaris. So this is a plant in the Protea family from Australia. Hakea is a pretty big genus with a lot of members in Western Australia. That's the province on the west side of the continent where the rainfall is in the wintertime, so a Mediterranean climate, much like ours in California. So a lot of things that grow there do well here. This one, Hakea petiolaris, is unusual among the Hakeas for how wide the leaves are. Beautiful pale blue-green leaves and tapering down to the petiole, the stalk of the individual leaf, and therefore called Hakea petiolaris. A lot of the other Hakeas have very narrow leaves that don't narrow down to a petiole at the base, and so this one stands out in that regard. But it's a wonderful plant in its flowers too. So the flowers are all over the stalk right now, and you can see them at various stages. So in the beginning, when they're young, they're tight and sort of greenish. And as they begin to expand, the styles are initially curled up, and then they extend and straighten out and become like little sea urchins. And the sea urchin Hakea is the common name for this plant. You can see all the stages at the same time, and you can see the wonderful woody seed capsules from last year's flowering. So a wonderful plant to check out if you're here at the garden. And if not, well, we'll show you some pictures. Hakea petiolaris. Plants in the genus Arctostaphylos are commonly known as manzanitas, and California has more of them than any other place in the world. Now, there is one species named Arctostaphylos manzanita, but all Arctostaphylos are referred to commonly as manzanitas. And this is one from near Santa Barbara called Arctostaphylos refugioensis. And it's an early flowering one, so you can see the flowers on it now, like little white bells hanging downward. And what's also nicely visible here is the beautiful bark. A lot of manzanitas have reddish brown bark that's really beautiful, and you can see that on full display here, even in the rain. Looks glorious. And this plant is a shrub like most manzanitas. A few of them get to be big enough to be a small tree, but mostly shrubs. And this one's a fine example, Arctostaphylos refugioensis. Echeveria is a genus in the stonecrop family, the Crassulaceae, and many of the species we grow in cultivation come from Mexico. There is one species that does cross the border northward into the United States, and quite a number of species that occur to the south. So there are new ones discovered in recent years in Bolivia and in Peru and even in northern Argentina. But almost all the ones that we grow in cultivation come from Mexico. Now, a lot of these bloom in the springtime, but there are others that bloom in the fall. And here is a wonderful example. This is a hybrid. All we know about it is Echeveria lilacina hybrid, and it does resemble lilacina, but its rosettes are bigger and not quite as lavender tinged as lilacina. But like lilacina, the flower stalk comes up and then bends over at the tip in this classic shepherd's crook shape that we see in so many echeverias. Now, there are other echeverias that bloom in the fall that are of the gibiflora type with great big leaves and with a tall inflorescence with lots of branches that have a very different look. But this is a look that a lot of the spring and summer blooming echeverias have with this shepherd's crook inflorescence and this neat rosette of leaves that makes them so popular with both people who grow them in pots and people who grow them in the garden. And this one putting on a wonderful show right here in December, Echeveria lilacina hybrid. Agave is another wonderful group of succulents that are very abundant in Mexico. And a lot of the agaves we have here at the Ruth Bancroft Garden bloom in June and July in the summer months. But this one is an exception. This is Agave potatorum. It's a common agave in Oaxaca, and here it is coming into bloom in the wintertime. So actually, as we film this, it's not quite open yet, but it will be any day now. And this is one of the agaves used in Oaxaca to make mezcal. So whereas tequila is only made from one single species, Agave tequilana, mezcal can be made from any number of different species. And in Oaxaca, this is a common one used for that purpose. But for our purposes, it is a beautiful sculptural plant for the garden with amazing teeth on the edge and this tall flower stalk coming up in the middle of winter. Now, this belongs to a group of agaves called the hemiflorae. That means winter flowering because they flower in the winter. And so these are all southern agaves that grow in southern Mexico or in Central America where they don't have to worry about winter cold. So they can bloom at a time of year when a lot of the northern agaves would not. But here it is with its giant stalk coming into flower in December, Agave potatorum. Aloe is a large genus in the asphodel family, Asphodelaceae, and we associate them a lot with South Africa because many of the common species we see grown in California do come from South Africa. But the genus ranges northward all the way up to North Africa and into the Arabian Peninsula across the Red Sea. So this yellow-flowered species here is Aloe vacillans, which occurs widely in Yemen and to the north in Saudi Arabia as well. This is a form from near Taiz in Yemen, and it has especially tall flower stalks with these beautiful yellow flowers and blooms in mainly November and December. So here it is putting on a glorious show at the beginning of December, and it does clump, so we have a number of rosettes. The clump has increased over the years, and it makes a beautiful flower display like this every year. Aloe vacillans. Eucalyptus is a large genus of plants in the Myrtaceae, or the myrtle family, and almost all of them come from Australia. Now, they are a familiar part of our landscape here in California because a lot of them are grown here, but they don't come from here. Sometimes people will make a face when I say eucalyptus because they associate eucalyptus with the blue gum, Eucalyptus globulus, which is somewhat invasive here in California. But that's certainly not true of most eucalyptus. This one here is Eucalyptus caesia from Western Australia, with its beautiful pink flowers. And we've had this growing in the garden here for over 40 years, and never once has a seedling volunteered. So it's certainly not an invasive plant whatsoever. It's one of the eucalyptus that we call a mallee. In other words, it's a multi-trunked, more bushy than tall tree plant. And it really shows a wonderful thing of the lignotuber. So that's this big fat swelling at the base. And what that does is, in case a fire comes through and burns up the plant, it can resprout from that lignotuber and grow new trunks and come back again. And so you see that on display here. And also you see the wonderful bark that peels off in strips and makes the trunk sort of multicolored with reddish browns and darker browns in a wonderful pattern. So a lot to see in this plant, and it's just getting going now with the flowers. Lots of buds on it that have not opened yet. Eucalyptus caesia. That brings us to the close of our December edition of What's in Bloom at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. It might be a cold and rainy day here, but some things look pretty good in the rain, and I thought we'd do our closing shot here next to this agave or mangave blue fountain, which is looking pretty glorious. So a mangave is a cross between a manfreda, which usually is of small stature and has purple spots on it, and an agave, which is oftentimes larger and more statuesque in appearance. And this one has a very agave-like appearance, but with little purple spots on it from the manfreda parent, and this wonderful upright habit that makes it look like a blue fountain, and that's what its name is, mangave blue fountain. Please check out our website, ruthbancroftgarden.org. We have all sorts of information about upcoming events and about our plant highlights that I've written over the years for all manner of different plants here at the garden. And please come to visit the garden if you possibly can. We're open every day of the week except Monday.